Don't step out of that water, the Alpha King said, and Evelyn's heart forgot how to breathe. Steam curled around the black stone basin in pale ribbons, hiding everything except the trembling hands she pressed against the smooth rim. A moment earlier, she had been alone, trying to scrub the red ceremonial dye from her sleeves before anyone noticed the humiliation Lady Celeste had arranged for her in the servants' corridor. Now the tallest, most feared man in the Northern Territories stood just inside the chamber door, rain darkening the shoulders of his long black coat, his silver eyes fixed not on her face, but on the water around her. Evelyn's heart beat so hard she could hear it over the storm. "Your Majesty," she whispered. Her voice came out thin. "I did not know this was your chamber." Rowan Vale did not answer at first. The chamber was enormous, built of midnight marble and warm brass, with a fire burning low beneath a carved stone mantel. Moonlight slipped through the high windows in narrow bands, turning the steam almost silver. Nothing in the room felt welcoming. Not the wolf banners hanging from the walls. Not the crown carved into the tiles. Not the heavy door that had sealed itself behind him with a quiet, terrible click. Evelyn looked down at the water and saw the truth she had missed. A wolf's head was etched into the rim of the basin, its eyes made from two pale stones that glimmered beneath the surface. She had not wandered into a guest bath. She had stepped into the private Moonwell of the Alpha King. "I can explain," she said quickly. "Lady Celeste sent me to deliver moonflower oil to the East Wing. Someone spilled dye on my uniform, and I thought this room was empty. I only wanted to wash it off before the ball." Rowan's expression did not soften. He crossed the floor with measured steps, every movement controlled, every line of him held tight beneath the black coat. Yet Evelyn noticed something strange. His right hand was clenched so hard the knuckles had gone pale. He looked less like a king angry at an intruder and more like a man standing too close to something he did not understand. "The doors are warded," he said. His voice was low, roughened by exhaustion. "They should not have opened for you." Evelyn swallowed. "Then I will leave as soon as they do." "No." The word landed between them like a locked gate. Fear rose sharp in her throat, but she forced herself not to look away. She had spent too many years lowering her eyes for people who believed being an Omega meant she had no right to take up space. Her wet sleeves clung to her wrists. Her hair dripped against her collarbone. Still, she lifted her chin. "You cannot keep me here because I made a mistake." For the first time, Rowan looked directly at her. The storm flashed white beyond the windows, and in that brief light, she saw something in his face that frightened her more than anger. Pain. Not the kind that asked to be seen. The kind that had been carried alone for so long it had become part of a person's bones. He stepped closer to the basin, then stopped several feet away, leaving the distance between them untouched. "I am not keeping you here because of a mistake," he said. "Evelyn, the Moonwell has marked you." Beneath the water, pale light began to gather around her hands. The red dye on her skin dissolved into thin silver lines, curling over her wrists like words in a language she had never learned. Evelyn stared at them, unable to move. Somewhere beyond the door, footsteps hurried down the corridor. Then Lady Celeste's voice rose, clear and accusing. "Open this door. I know the servant girl is in there." Rowan's gaze never left Evelyn's face. "No," he said quietly. "You cannot leave." For one suspended second, Evelyn could not hear the rain, the footsteps, or Lady Celeste calling from the other side of the sealed door. All she could hear was the faint pulse of light beneath the water, and the unsteady rhythm of her own breathing. The silver marks around her wrists had stopped moving, but they did not fade. They rested against her pale skin in delicate curves, almost like moonlit vines. Evelyn tried to lift one hand from the basin. The moment her fingers broke the surface, the glowing lines brightened. King Rowan moved before she could pull farther away. He did not touch her. He only raised one hand, and the pale light settled again beneath the water. "Keep your hands below the surface," he said. His voice was calm now, though something tense remained beneath it. "Until I understand what the Moonwell has done." Evelyn stared at him. You expect me to be calm when your door has locked itself and Lady Celeste is outside accusing me of something I did not do? The question came out sharper than she intended. A servant in Evelyn's position did not raise her voice to the king. Not in Blackthorn Palace. Not anywhere in the Northern Territories. But fear had made a small fire in her chest, and she was tired of letting fear turn her into a shadow. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. The distant thunder rolled across the sky. Then he walked to the fireplace and pulled a thick gray cloak from a cedar chest beside the mantel. He set it on a nearby chair without looking at her again. When the water is safe, you may use that, he said. No one will enter this room. It was not an apology. But it was not cruelty either. Evelyn did not know what to do with that. Outside, Lady Celeste struck the door with the flat of her palm. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but I saw Evelyn Hart enter this wing. She has been acting strangely all evening. I fear she may have taken something that does not belong to her. Her voice carried a careful note of concern, polished and sweet enough to fool anyone who had never been on the receiving end of her smile. Evelyn closed her eyes. Of course. Celeste had not merely sent her to the wrong chamber. She had prepared a story before Evelyn even arrived. The dye on her clothes. The false directions. The crowded hallway where everyone had watched her run. It had all been arranged so that, by the time she was found here, no one would question the version Celeste gave them. She planned this, Evelyn whispered. Rowan's gaze returned to her. You are certain? Evelyn gave a bitter little laugh. Lady Celeste has wanted me dismissed from the palace since I started working in the herb rooms. She says an Omega with no family name should be grateful for floor work and silent corners. The king's expression changed so slightly that another person might not have noticed. But Evelyn had spent years watching powerful people hide their feelings behind perfect faces. His jaw tightened. His eyes went colder. And did you report this treatment to anyone? To whom? She asked. The head steward is Celeste's uncle. The court ladies call her the future Luna. Everyone knows which side is safe. Silence followed. It was not an easy silence. It filled the chamber with all the things either of them said. Rowan turned toward the door. Lady Celeste, he called, his voice carrying through the stone with quiet authority. Leave this wing. The footsteps outside stopped. Your Majesty, I only wish to protect your reputation. Then do not speak of matters you do not understand. Celeste did not answer right away. Evelyn imagined her standing in the hallway, surrounded by guards and servants, her perfect face carefully arranged. At last, Celeste said, The council will hear of this. Rowan's eyes never left Evelyn's. The council will hear what I choose to tell them. The footsteps retreated, slower this time. When the corridor finally fell quiet, Evelyn released a breath she had been holding for too long. But the relief lasted only a moment. The light in the water flickered. A cold ache traveled from her wrist to her elbow, and the silver marks shifted into the shape of a crescent moon split down the middle. Rowan saw it at the same instant. His face lost its color. What is it? Evelyn asked. He stepped closer to the basin, his voice lower than before. That mark has not appeared in this chamber for 20 years. Evelyn watched the light tremble against the water. What does it mean? Rowan looked toward the dark windows, where the storm pressed against the glass. It means someone did not send you here by accident. The meaning of those words settled over Evelyn more heavily than the steam. Someone did not send you here by accident. Her fingers tightened beneath the water, disturbing the silver reflection trembling around her wrists. She wanted to ask who. She wanted to ask why. But the question that rose first was smaller and more painful. Did my mother know about this place? Rowan's eyes shifted toward her so quickly that she knew she had struck something hidden. The Alpha King did not look away. He did not pretend he had not heard. Still, the pause before he answered was long enough for the fire to crack twice in the quiet chamber. What was her name? He asked. Evelyn swallowed. She had not spoken her mother's name in this palace. Not once. Her mother had died when Evelyn was 11, leaving behind a cedar box, a faded green ribbon, and a handful of memories that always seemed softer around the edges than they should have been. "Marion Hart," Evelyn said. "She worked as a healer in the southern villages before she became ill." Rowan's face went still. Not cold. Still. Like a forest before the snow begins to fall. "Marion Hart was not only a healer," he said at last. "She was one of the last keepers of the Moonwell." Evelyn stared at him. The words did not fit anywhere inside the life she knew. Her mother had been gentle. Quiet. She had smelled like rosemary, warm bread, and rain on the porch steps. She had never worn a crown or carried a blade or spoken of ancient magic. "That is not possible," Evelyn whispered. "My mother was nobody important." Rowan's gaze lowered to the crescent mark glowing at her wrist. "Important people are not always the ones the world remembers." The answer should have comforted her. Instead, it made her chest ache. Outside, the storm deepened. Wind swept across the high windows, and shadows moved over the black marble walls. Evelyn glanced toward the locked door. She could picture the palace beyond it with painful clarity. Servants whispering in the halls. Guards waiting for orders. Lady Celeste smiling with concern while she planted poison in every ear willing to listen. By sunrise, Evelyn knew what the story would become. A low-born Omega had slipped into the king's private chamber. She had been caught in his Moonwell. She had somehow made him defend her. The truth would not matter as much as the shape of the rumor. "You should let me leave before anyone says more," she said. "I can go back to the herb rooms. I can pack my things. I will not cause trouble for you." Rowan's expression hardened, but not at her. "You believe this is about trouble?" His voice remained quiet, yet something in it made the air feel tighter. "Evelyn, the mark on your wrist is a beacon. Anyone who knows what it is will know you touched the Moonwell. And anyone who has been searching for it will know exactly where to find you." She looked down again. The silver crescent seemed harmless. Beautiful, even. That frightened her most. "Who would search for me?" Rowan moved to the nearest window, his dark outline reflected in the rain-streaked glass. For a moment he looked less like the ruler every pack feared and more like a man carrying a burden too large for any one person. "There are people in this palace who have spent years waiting for the Moonwell to wake," he said. "They believe it can break the oldest law in this kingdom." Evelyn felt a chill move through her, though the water was warm. "And what law is that?" Rowan turned back. The silver in his eyes had changed. It was no longer distant. It held something like warning. "The law that keeps the blood moon curse buried inside me." Before she could answer, a soft knock came from the outer door. Not Lady Celeste's sharp demand. Not a guard's heavy fist. Just 3 careful taps. Rowan's entire body went rigid. A man's voice spoke from the hallway, smooth and measured. "Your Majesty, forgive the late hour. The council requests your presence. They say the matter of the Omega cannot wait until morning." Evelyn watched Rowan's face close behind a mask she could not read. Then his gaze returned to her, and for the first time, she understood that whatever had begun in the Moonwell was larger than a mistake, larger than gossip, and perhaps larger than either of them. "Stay in the water," Rowan said softly. "And do not trust anyone who tells you they knew your mother." The voice outside waited with patient certainty, and Evelyn understood that patience could be more dangerous than shouting. It belonged to Lord Damien Crow, the king's chief adviser, a man she had seen only from a distance in the great hall. He always wore dark blue coats with silver buttons and smiled as though every secret in the room had already been placed in his hands. Rowan did not answer immediately. He stood beside the basin, one hand resting against the carved stone, his eyes fixed on the door as if he could see through it. The silence stretched so long that Evelyn could hear water dripping from the ends of her hair. Then Rowan said, "The council may wait." Damien's voice remained smooth. "They are concerned, Your Majesty. Lady Celeste claims the palace wards were disturbed. She fears an intruder may have entered your private rooms." Evelyn felt her stomach twist. An intruder. It was such a simple word. It could turn her from a frightened servant into a threat before she had a chance to explain herself. Rowan's expression did not change. Lady Celeste fears many things that do not concern her. There was a pause outside. Not surprise. More like calculation. Of course, Damien replied. But the Blood Moon Ball begins in less than 2 hours. Every alpha family in the Northern Territories has gathered beneath this roof. Rumors move faster than servants, and servants move faster than truth. His words were polite, but the meaning beneath them was sharp. He was not asking Rowan to open the door. He was reminding him that the entire palace was already watching. Evelyn lowered her gaze to the water. The silver crescent on her wrist had dimmed, but it had not disappeared. She thought of the herb rooms beneath the west stairwell, where she spent most days grinding lavender, winterroot, and dried moonflower petals into tiny bowls. Nobody watched her there. Nobody waited for her to make a mistake. Her life had been small, but at least it had been hers. Now one wrong door had placed her in the center of a storm that did not feel like it would pass. Rowan finally spoke. "Tell the council I will address them before the ball." "As you wish, Your Majesty." The footsteps retreated, unhurried and precise. Evelyn listened until the corridor became quiet again. Then she looked up. "He knows." Rowan turned from the door. "He suspects." "That is worse." A faint change moved through his expression, almost a smile, but it vanished before she could be sure. "You are not wrong." He crossed to a narrow table near the fire and opened a small wooden box. Inside lay a folded gray dress, simple but clean, with long sleeves and a high collar. Evelyn recognized the fabric at once. It was not court silk. It was the kind of soft wool worn by women in the northern villages when winter came early. "This belonged to my sister," Rowan said. His voice lowered. "She kept it here for travelers who arrived at the palace with nothing." Evelyn looked at the dress, then at him. "I cannot wear something that belongs to your family." "You can't," he said. "And you will, because you should not have to face anyone wrapped in a bath cloth." Heat rose to Evelyn's cheeks, not from embarrassment alone but from the unexpected gentleness in the words. Rowan stepped back and turned toward the window, giving her the only privacy he could in a room with locked doors. "When the water settles, the ward will release you," he said. "You may dress behind the screen." "I will not look." Evelyn wanted to believe him. She did not know why that mattered so much. She waited until the silver glow faded from the surface, then stood carefully, keeping one hand pressed over the mark on her wrist. The room was warm, but the air against her skin made her shiver. She moved behind the carved cedar screen and dressed quickly, pulling the gray wool over her damp shoulders. It fit loosely, but it felt solid. Real. When she stepped out, Rowan was still facing the window. "Your Majesty," she said. He turned. His eyes moved once over the silver crescent at her wrist, then returned to her face. "Do not call me that when we are alone," he said. Evelyn blinked. "What should I call you?" The thunder rolled again, low and distant. Rowan's gaze went dark with something she could not name. "For tonight," he said, "call me Rowan. Because before this night ends, you may need to decide whether you can trust me." Trust. The word stayed between them after Rowan spoke it, quieter than the rain and far more difficult to ignore. Evelyn looked down at the gray wool sleeves covering her arms, then at the silver crescent still visible above her left cuff. She had trusted people before. She had trusted the aunt who promised to keep her after her mother died, until the woman sent her away to work for a pack she barely knew. She had trusted the head steward when he said the palace valued diligence, until he quietly moved her schedule whenever Lady Celeste complained that Evelyn was too noticeable. Trust had always come with a cost, and Evelyn had learned to survive by needing as little of it as possible. Rowan watched her without pressing for an answer. That surprised her. Most powerful people filled silence because they feared what might happen if someone else had time to think. Rowan simply waited, his hands loose at his sides, the black coat still damp from the storm. Up close, He looked tired in a way no portrait or royal announcement had ever shown. There were faint shadows beneath his silver eyes. A thin line of strain rested between his brows. The stories had called him ruthless, distant, impossible to please. None of them had said he looked like a man who had not slept peacefully in years. "You said the Moonwell marked me," Evelyn said. Her voice was steadier now. "You said my mother was a keeper. Why did no one tell me?" Rowan moved toward the fire, not away from her, but not close enough to crowd her. He rested one hand on the mantel, his fingers near the carved wolf crest. "Because the keepers were erased from the court records after the last blood moon crisis," he said. "Their names became dangerous. Their families became targets." Evelyn felt the room tilt slightly around her. "Targets for whom?" He did not answer at once. The pause told her more than a quick reply would have. "For people who believe the Moonwell should belong to the council," Rowan said finally. "People who believe the king should be controlled by anyone willing to use fear as a weapon." The words were careful, but Evelyn heard the anger under them. Not loud anger. Older anger. The kind that had been forced into silence for too long. She thought of Damien Crow's voice outside the door, polished and calm. She thought of Lady Celeste's perfect concern. Suddenly the palace did not feel like a home for noble families gathered for a celebration. It felt like a house built over a deep crack in the earth, beautiful from a distance and unstable beneath every step. "And what do they want from me?" she asked. Rowan's gaze dropped to her wrist again. "They may want you to open the Moonwell." Evelyn let out a quiet breath. "I do not know how. Neither did your mother at first." The fire snapped, sending a small burst of orange light across the room. For a moment, Evelyn saw something soften in Rowan's face. Regret, perhaps. Or grief. "She saved lives during the last crisis," he said. "Including mine." Evelyn stared at him. "You knew her." "I was 19. His voice went lower. "She was the only person in this palace who spoke to me like I was human when everyone else spoke to me like I was already a throne." The sentence settled in Evelyn's chest with unexpected weight. She had imagined her mother alone in some distant village, forgotten by the world. But Rowan remembered her. The king remembered the sound of her voice. Before Evelyn could ask more, a bell began to ring somewhere beyond the chamber walls. It was not the bright music of a celebration. It rang once, then again, deep and slow, each note traveling through the stone beneath their feet. Rowan's expression changed instantly. He turned toward the door. "That is the council bell," he said. "They are calling an emergency session." Evelyn felt the old instinct rise inside her, the instinct to make herself smaller and disappear before trouble found her. "Then you should go." Rowan looked back at her. "I will." "And what happens to me while you are gone?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Rowan studied her face, and something in his expression became gentler than before. "You will not be left alone," he said. "But you will not be trapped either." He crossed the room to the wall beside the cedar screen and pressed his palm against a narrow seam in the marble. A hidden panel opened without a sound, revealing a small passage lit by blue lanterns. "This leads to the old library," he said. "No one uses it now. There is a lock on the inside, food in the cabinet, and a window that opens onto the north garden. You may leave through it if you decide you cannot stay." Evelyn looked into the passage, then back at him. An escape route. A real one. He was giving her a choice. Rowan held out a small silver key in his open palm. "Take it," he said. Evelyn stepped forward and accepted it. The key was cool against her skin. Their fingers did not touch. Still, the crescent on her wrist warmed beneath the gray sleeve. Rowan noticed. His eyes narrowed toward the glow, but he said nothing. Then a second sound came from the hallway. Not footsteps this time. A faint scrape, slow and deliberate, just outside the sealed door. Rowan went still. Evelyn's hand closed around the key. The scrape came again. And from the other side of the door, a woman began to whisper her mother's name. "Marian Hart." The woman whispered again from beyond the door, and Evelyn's blood turned cold. No one in Blackthorn Palace should have known that name. Not the servants in the West Wing. Not the noble families arriving for the Blood Moon Ball. Not Lady Celeste, who had barely looked at Evelyn unless there was an audience nearby. Yet the voice outside spoke her mother's name with the softness of a memory. Rowan moved between Evelyn and the door at once. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for a weapon. He only stood there, broad shoulders squared beneath his rain-dark coat, and the room seemed to shrink around him. "Who is outside?" he asked. There was no answer. The scrape along the door stopped. The fire cracked once behind them, and Evelyn realized she was holding the silver key so tightly that its edge pressed into her palm. "I know that voice," she whispered. Rowan glanced back at her. "Who is it?" Evelyn searched her memories, reaching through years of distance and grief. The voice was older now, thinner than she remembered, but something in its careful rhythm pulled at her. Then the answer came with a sudden ache. "Martha Bell," she said. "She used to help my mother in the village clinic. She taught me how to dry fever leaf without crushing the stems." Rowan's face changed, not with relief, but concern. "Martha Bell left the southern villages 15 years ago." "I know." Evelyn stepped closer before fear could stop her. "She disappeared after my mother died." Rowan lifted one hand, stopping her without touching her. "Evelyn, do not open that door." The command was quiet, but it carried the weight of something urgent. She looked at him, and the old resistance rose inside her. All evening, people had told her where to stand, where to hide, what dangers she was too small to face. But Rowan was not looking at her like she was weak. He was looking at her like he was afraid something would take her away. "She knew my mother," Evelyn said. "Maybe she knows what happened to her. Maybe someone wants you to believe that." His words struck harder because they were reasonable. Outside, the woman spoke again, this time louder. "Evelyn, please. I have searched for you since the night Marion told me to run." The silver crescent beneath Evelyn's sleeve warmed sharply. A pale line of light slipped from under the fabric and curled around the key in her hand. Rowan noticed it. His expression tightened. "The mark is reacting to her voice," he said. "That does not prove she is safe." Evelyn looked at the sealed door. Her heart wanted to believe. Her mind remembered the cruel precision of Celeste's trap, the way every step tonight had been arranged before she understood what was happening. Hope could be a doorway too. Sometimes it led somewhere warm. Sometimes it led straight into a cage. "What happened to my mother?" she asked, not to Rowan this time, but to the woman outside. For several breaths, there was only rain against the windows. Then Martha answered, and her voice broke on the words. "She found out who was feeding the curse beneath this palace." Rowan went completely still. "Do not listen," he said. But Evelyn could hear something beneath his warning. Not certainty. Fear. Martha continued, her whisper turning urgent. "Your mother did not die from illness, Evelyn. She died because she tried to protect you from the man who still walks these halls." The room seemed to lose its warmth. Evelyn stared at Rowan, but he was no longer watching the door. His eyes had gone to the narrow passage leading toward the old library, where blue lanterns flickered along the hidden corridor. A shadow moved across the far wall. Slow. Silent. Impossible, because no one should have been inside that passage except them. Rowan stepped backward toward Evelyn, his voice dropping so low she almost did not hear it. "Take the key," he said. "Go through the library passage now." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What about Martha?" Rowan looked toward the door again. "That is exactly what I need to find out." The blue lanterns in the hidden passage trembled as though a draft had passed through them, but Evelyn could not feel any wind. She stood at the threshold with the silver key pressed against her palm, unable to make herself move. Rowan had told her to go, yet Martha Bell was still outside the sealed door, still calling her mother's name in a voice that pulled at the oldest part of Evelyn's heart. "I cannot leave her out there," Evelyn said. Rowan did not turn from the door. You do not know that it is Martha. I know her voice. You know the voice you remember. His answer was quiet, but it carried no impatience. That almost made it worse. 15 years can change a person. Fear can change a person. Someone can use both. Evelyn looked down the passage. The old library lay somewhere beyond the blue lights, hidden behind walls that smelled of dust and cedar. It offered safety, or at least the kind of safety that came from being out of sight. But safety had never answered the questions she carried about her mother. It had never explained why Marion Hart's name could make the Alpha King go still. It had never told Evelyn why a crescent of silver light now rested on her skin. Outside the door, Martha spoke again. Evelyn, your mother left something for you. She told me you would know when to find it. The words slipped beneath Evelyn's defenses. Rowan's shoulders tightened. That is exactly what someone would say to make you open the door. Evelyn lifted her eyes to him. Then tell me the truth. Did my mother leave anything here? For the first time since they had met in the Moonwell, Rowan looked away. It lasted only a second, but she saw it. The pause. The regret. The answer hidden behind both. Yes, he said. She did. The passage seemed to grow colder. What did she leave? Rowan faced her again. The silver in his eyes was darker now, almost gray. A letter. Sealed in the old library. It was meant for you when the Moonwell woke. Evelyn felt the floor shift beneath her, though it did not move. Her mother had written to her. Not a faded note in a cedar box. Not a memory softened by years. A letter waiting inside this palace, hidden behind locked doors and old secrets. Why did you not tell me? She asked. Rowan's face changed, and this time the pain was impossible to miss. Because I hoped it would never be necessary. That is not an answer. No, he said softly. It is not. The honesty of it stopped her more than an excuse would have. Behind the door, the scrape came again, slower than before. Then Martha's whisper changed. It became frightened. Evelyn, do not trust Damien Crowe. He knows you are marked. Rowan went still. The name hung in the room like smoke. A heartbeat later, the council bell rang again, but this time it was not deep and formal. It was rapid. Urgent. 3 notes, then 3 more. Somewhere far below them, doors opened. Voices rose in the palace corridors. Rowan crossed to the wall beside the hidden passage and placed his hand over a small iron lever. The council will be searching this wing now, he said. Damien will not come alone. Evelyn stared at the sealed door. And Martha? Rowan's jaw tightened. I will find out who is outside. You said not to trust anyone who knew my mother. I said not to trust anyone who tells you they knew her. His gaze held hers, steady and grave. That includes me. The words should have made her run. Instead, they made something inside her loosen. Rowan was not asking for blind faith. He was warning her against himself as much as anyone else. Evelyn looked once more at the door, then at the lantern-lit passage. She had spent years being moved from place to place by other people's decisions. Tonight, every path seemed dangerous. But one path led to the letter her mother had left behind. She closed her hand around the key. I am going to the library, she said. Rowan nodded once. Lock the door behind you. Evelyn stepped into the passage. The hidden panel began to slide shut, cutting the chamber into a narrowing strip of firelight. Just before it closed, she heard a soft sound from the other side of the room. Not from Martha. Not from Rowan. From somewhere inside the walls. A woman's voice, gentle as a memory, whispered, Evelyn, do not let them separate you from the truth. The hidden panel sealed behind Evelyn with a soft stone sigh, and the firelight vanished. For a moment, she stood alone in the narrow passage with one hand against the cold wall, and the other wrapped around the silver key. Blue lanterns glowed at regular intervals above her, their light too pale to feel warm. The corridor smelled of old paper, cedar dust, and rain trapped inside ancient stone. Evelyn listened for Rowan on the other side, but the walls swallowed every sound. She could not hear Martha Bell. She could not hear the council bell. She could not even hear the storm. There was only the faint echo of that gentle voice in her mind. Do not let them separate you from the truth. Her mother had sounded like that when Evelyn was small and frightened by thunder, calm enough to make the whole world seem less dangerous. But her mother had been gone for 13 years. Evelyn forced herself to breathe slowly. One breath. Then another. The passage stretched ahead for perhaps 30 feet before turning left, where the lantern light faded into a darker blue. She began to walk. Her borrowed gray dress brushed against her knees. The silver crescent beneath her sleeve remained warm, like a small heartbeat resting against her wrist. At the end of the corridor, she found a door made from dark oak. It had no handle, only a keyhole shaped like a crescent moon. Evelyn looked down at the key in her palm. Rowan had known exactly where she needed to go. That thought should have angered her. Instead, it made her feel strangely unsteady. He had hidden a letter from her for years. Yet, he had also given her the key without asking her to promise anything in return. She slid the key into the lock. It turned with a quiet click. The door opened inward, revealing a library larger than she had imagined. Shelves rose nearly to the ceiling, packed with leather-bound books, maps, glass jars of dried herbs, and wooden boxes marked with symbols she could not read. A tall window overlooked the north garden, where rain streaked the glass in silver threads. A small fire burned in a stone hearth, though no one appeared to have tended it recently. In the center of the room stood a round table. On it rested a single cedar box. Evelyn stopped breathing. She knew that box. Not this one exactly, but the pattern carved into its lid. A crescent moon above 3 small leaves. Her mother had drawn the same symbol on the corner of every recipe card she kept in the kitchen. Evelyn crossed the room slowly, afraid that the box might disappear if she moved too fast. The silver mark on her wrist brightened with every step. When she reached the table, the lid lifted by itself. Inside lay a folded letter, yellowed at the edges and tied with a faded green ribbon. Her mother's ribbon. Evelyn touched it with the tip of one finger. The paper felt real. The knot came loose beneath her hand. She unfolded the letter carefully, and the first line blurred before her eyes. My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, the Moonwell has awakened, and the man you have every reason to fear has finally chosen to tell you the truth. Evelyn's throat tightened. She read the next line once. Then again. Rowan did not betray me, my love. He tried to save me. Before she could read further, a faint sound came from the far side of the library. A book slid from one of the upper shelves and landed softly on the floor. Evelyn turned toward the noise. The room was still empty. But in the dark reflection of the rain-streaked window, she saw a figure standing behind her. A woman in a dark blue gown, watching from the doorway with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Lady Celeste had found her. Lady Celeste stood in the doorway as though the hidden library belonged to her. Rainwater glittered along the hem of her dark blue gown, and the soft gold pins in her pale hair caught the firelight whenever she moved. She looked perfectly composed, almost beautiful in the careful way a winter garden could be beautiful, all sharp lines and flowers that never offered warmth. Evelyn turned slowly from the table, keeping one hand over her mother's letter. How did you get in here? Celeste's smile lifted by only a fraction. The palace has more doors than you know, Evelyn. Some were built for kings. Some were built for people clever enough to survive them. Her voice was gentle, but Evelyn heard the warning beneath it. The hidden panel behind Celeste stood open just wide enough to reveal a narrow passage beyond. It was not the passage Rowan had shown her. This one was darker, lined with gray stone and no lanterns at all. Evelyn's heart began to race, but she did not step back. You should not be here, she said. Neither should you. Celeste's pale eyes moved to the letter on the table. For the first time, her calm expression faltered. It was only a moment, a tiny change around her mouth, but Evelyn saw it. Celeste knew what the letter was. That belonged to my mother, Evelyn said. Did you know it was here? Celeste entered the room, closing the hidden door behind her with a quiet click. "I knew your mother hid many things before she died." The words struck Evelyn with a cold force. "Do not speak about her like you knew her." "I knew enough." Celeste stopped a few feet away. She did not reach for the letter, but her gaze remained fixed on it. "Marian Hart was not the quiet village healer you have been told she was. She understood the Moonwell. She understood what it could awaken. And she understood that one day, someone would come looking for you." Evelyn's fingers tightened against the paper. The fireplace gave a low crack, and the sound made her flinch. Celeste noticed. "Of course she did. You arranged tonight," Evelyn said. "The die. The false directions. You wanted me in the king's chamber." Celeste's expression became unreadable. "I wanted you to be seen." "Why?" "Because invisible girls are easy to erase." The answer was so quiet that Evelyn almost missed it. For a second, she saw something different in Celeste's face. Not kindness. Not guilt. Something tired. Something trapped. Then it vanished beneath the polished mask of the future Luna. "You have spent years thinking I hated you," Celeste continued. "Perhaps that made things simpler. But I did not choose the chamber. I was told where to send you." Evelyn felt the room grow colder. "By Damien Crow." Celeste's eyes flickered toward the door. That was answer enough. A slow fear moved through Evelyn, deeper than the fear of being caught in the Moonwell or accused in front of the court. Damien had known which room mattered. He had known the wards would react. He had known enough about her mother to turn Evelyn's ordinary life into a piece on his board. "Why tell me this now?" Evelyn asked. Celeste looked toward the rain-streaked window. "Because Damien does not want you to read that letter. He wants you frightened, confused, and grateful to anyone who offers you a hand." Her gaze returned to Evelyn. "Including Rowan?" Evelyn remembered what Rowan had said. "Do not trust anyone who tells you they knew your mother. That includes me." The words had sounded honest then. They still did. But honesty was not the same as innocence. "What does Damien want from the Moonwell?" Evelyn asked. Celeste's smile disappeared completely. "He wants the king to lose control in front of the entire court." The council bell rang again somewhere beyond the walls, rapid and urgent. Celeste took one step backward toward the dark passage. "Read the letter, Evelyn. Read all of it. Then decide who has been protecting you, and who has been protecting a secret." Before Evelyn could stop her, Celeste opened the hidden door. Cold air swept into the library, carrying the faint scent of whetstone and something bitter, like burned herbs. At the threshold, Celeste paused without looking back. "And when Rowan comes for you," she said, "ask him why your mother wrote his name in the margins." Then she was gone. Evelyn stood alone beside the cedar box, the letter trembling in her hands. Slowly, she unfolded the page farther. Beneath her mother's first words, written in faded ink at the edge of the paper, was one name repeated again and again. Rowan Vale. Rowan Vale. The name appeared in the margins so many times that Evelyn's eyes began to blur. It was written beside hurried notes, small symbols, and sentences crossed out so hard the paper had thinned beneath the ink. She lowered herself into the chair beside the table because her knees no longer felt steady. The library fire flickered across the letter, and every shadow on the page seemed to move with her breathing. For several seconds she could not make herself read another word. Celeste's warning circled in her mind. "Ask him why your mother wrote his name in the margins." Evelyn had wanted answers all her life. She had imagined them arriving like sunlight through an open window, bright and simple and certain. Instead, the truth came in fragments, hidden in a dead woman's handwriting and surrounded by names she no longer knew whom to trust. At last, she unfolded the last section of the letter. "My dearest Evelyn," the words began again, and this time her mother's hand looked less careful, as if it had been written in a hurry. "If Lord Crow tells you that Rowan Vale betrayed me, do not believe him without hearing Rowan's truth. He was young, frightened, and burdened by a curse no one should have carried. But he tried to protect us when the court had already chosen silence. Evelyn pressed her fingers to her mouth. The next sentence made her chest tighten. The Moonwell does not awaken for obedience. It awakens for choice. If the mark appears on your skin, no king, council, or prophecy has the right to command your future. Not even Rowan. Especially not Rowan. The fire shifted behind her. Evelyn turned sharply. Rowan stood in the doorway of the library, rainwater still darkening his shoulders, his face pale with exhaustion. He must have found another route through the hidden walls. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn lifted the letter. You knew. Rowan closed the door behind him. I knew there was a letter. You knew my mother wrote about you. His eyes lowered for one brief second. Yes. The answer hurt more because he did not deny it. Evelyn rose from the chair, the letter trembling in her hand. Then why did you keep it from me? Rowan took a breath that looked difficult. Because every time I considered sending for you, I remembered what the Moonwell would mean. It would place you in danger. It would give Damien another way to reach you. You do not get to decide what I can survive, Evelyn said. Her voice did not rise, but it carried through the library with a force that surprised even her. You do not get to hide my mother's words because you are afraid of what they will ask of you. Rowan's gaze met hers. There was no anger in it. Only the kind of regret that had no place left to hide. You are right, he said. Evelyn had expected an excuse. A defense. A reminder that he was king and the world required hard choices from him. Instead, he gave her those two words, and they left her feeling more unsteady than before. Rowan stepped closer, then stopped beside the round table, leaving space between them. When Marion discovered what Damien was doing, she came to me, he said. She believed he was using old council magic to feed the blood moon curse. I wanted to expose him. She warned me that he had allies in every room where power was discussed. Evelyn remembered Martha outside the chamber door. Your mother did not die from illness. She died because she tried to protect you from the man who still walks these halls. What happened to her? Evelyn asked. Rowan looked toward the storm-dark window. She vanished after leaving the palace with proof. By the time I found her, the proof was gone. The court called it illness. I was not strong enough then to stop them from making that lie permanent. Silence settled between them. Not empty silence. Grieving silence. Evelyn looked down at her mother's letter again, then at the bright crescent on her wrist. The Moonwell does not awaken for obedience. It awakens for choice. Celeste said Damien wants you to lose control in front of the court, she said. Rowan's expression sharpened. She found you? She said she did not choose the chamber. She said Damien told her where to send me. Rowan's jaw tightened, and the silver in his eyes darkened. Then the council bell was never about an emergency session. At that exact moment, the library doors opened from the far side. Lord Damien Crowe stood beneath the archway in his dark blue coat, calm as ever, with 4 council guards waiting behind him. He looked at Evelyn's glowing wrist, then at the letter in her hand. His smile was almost gentle. There you are, he said. The entire court has been waiting for the girl who can either save their king or destroy him. Lord Damien Crowe spoke as though he had entered a quiet meeting rather than a room full of old secrets. The 4 council guards remained near the archway, their silver-trimmed uniforms neat and formal, their eyes carefully lowered. Evelyn noticed that none of them looked directly at Rowan. None of them looked at her either. They stood like men who had been given orders they did not want to question. Rowan stepped slightly in front of Evelyn, not blocking her from view, but making it clear that Damien would not reach her without being seen. You entered a private royal chamber without permission, Rowan said. His voice was calm, yet every word settled into the library with the weight of stone. Damien folded his hands behind his back. The palace is under unusual strain tonight. Forgive me for being cautious. Caution does not require 4 guards. No, Damien replied. But the court requires reassurance. Evelyn held her mother's letter close to her chest. The paper felt fragile, yet it was the strongest thing she had touched all night. Damien's eyes drifted toward it, and the warmth in his expression disappeared for half a second. That was all she needed. He was afraid of what Marion had written. "You knew my mother," Evelyn said. Damien looked at her as though he had expected the question. "I knew Marion Hart, yes. She was a gifted healer. She was more than that." Rowan's voice cut through the room. Damien sighed softly. "We all become more in the memories of those who loved us." The answer sounded polished. Too polished. Evelyn remembered the line in her mother's letter. "If Lord Crow tells you that Rowan Vale betrayed me, do not believe him without hearing Rowan's truth." She looked at Damien and felt something inside her settle. Not certainty. Not yet. But a quiet refusal to be guided by the first story anyone offered her. "Why did you send Lady Celeste to direct me to the Moonwell?" she asked. The guards shifted almost imperceptibly. Damien's smile returned, smaller this time. "I did no such thing." "Then why was she afraid when she saw my mother's letter?" Evelyn asked. Damien's gaze sharpened. Rowan looked at her, and for a moment she felt the full force of his attention. He was not trying to silence her. He was waiting to see what she would choose. The realization steadied her more than anything else had. Damien took one slow step forward. "Miss Hart, the court is frightened. The mark on your wrist has awakened an ancient power. People will ask questions. They will make claims. Some may even try to use your confusion against you." "Like you are doing now?" Evelyn asked. Silence filled the library. Then Damien's smile faded completely. "I am trying to keep the kingdom from falling into panic." Rowan's silver eyes darkened. "The kingdom has survived your protection long enough." The air changed around them. Not with noise. Not with spectacle. With truth finally pressing against the surface. Damien turned his attention back to Evelyn. "Come with me to the council chamber. Read the letter before witnesses. Let the court decide what should happen next." Evelyn's first instinct was to refuse. The thought of facing the council made her stomach tighten. She could already imagine Celeste in the hall, nobles whispering behind jeweled hands, people deciding who she was before she spoke a single word. Then she remembered every time she had hidden in a quiet corner because someone else had made her feel too small to stand in the light. Her mother had written that the Moonwell awakened for choice. Evelyn looked at Rowan. "If I go," she said, "I go because I choose to. Not because Damien orders it. Not because the council demands it. And not because you tell me to." Rowan did not hesitate. "Then you choose." Evelyn turned toward Damien, her fingers closing around the letter. "Take us to the council chamber," she said. "But you will listen before you decide who I am." Damien stepped aside. The guards moved with him, opening a path through the library doors. As Evelyn walked forward, Rowan matched her pace without touching her hand. Just before they crossed the threshold, the silver crescent on her wrist flashed once beneath her sleeve, and every lantern in the hallway went dark. Darkness swallowed the hallway so completely that Evelyn could not see the floor beneath her feet. For one sharp second, panic rose in her throat. Then Rowan's voice came from beside her, low and steady. "Evelyn, stay where you are." She heard fabric shift as he stepped closer, but he did not touch her. He only stood near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence through the cold air. Somewhere ahead, one of the council guards muttered a prayer beneath his breath. Another struck a match, but the flame died before it could catch. Lord Damien Crow was silent. That silence frightened Evelyn more than anything else. The crescent on her wrist pulsed once beneath her sleeve. A pale silver glow spread from her skin, not bright enough to light the corridor at first, but enough to reveal the outlines of the old stone walls. Then the glow widened. It flowed across the floor in thin, curling lines, following cracks in the marble that had been invisible a moment earlier. The lines formed a path leading away from the council chamber. Leading down the eastern hall. Leading back toward the room where the Moonwell waited. "What is happening?" Evelyn whispered. Damien answered before Rowan could speak. "The mark is unstable. It is reacting to the curse." His voice was controlled, but now Evelyn could hear strain beneath the polished calm. She must be taken to the council chamber immediately. Rowan's eyes flashed silver in the dim light. You do not give orders while the Moonwell is calling her. Damien turned toward him. And you would rather let an untrained Omega follow an ancient force through the palace? I would rather let her decide where she goes, Rowan said. The words settled over Evelyn with more force than the darkness itself. She looked down at the glowing path. It did not feel like a command. It felt like a memory waiting to be found. The air along the eastern hall carried a faint scent of rosemary and rain. Her mother's scent. Evelyn's heart tightened. She could hear Marian's voice in her mind, soft and clear as it had been when she was a child standing barefoot in the kitchen. The Moonwell does not awaken for obedience. It awakens for choice. Evelyn lifted her head. I am going back, she said. Damien's expression hardened. That would be unwise. You have said a great many things tonight, Evelyn replied, surprised by the calm in her own voice. But you have not given me one reason to believe you. The council guards exchanged uncertain looks. Rowan did not smile, but something in his face softened. He stepped aside, clearing the path without blocking her. Then I will walk with you, he said. Evelyn nodded once. Together, they followed the silver lines through the dark corridor. The guards remained behind Damien, but the advisor came after them anyway, his steps measured and quiet. At the end of the hall, the sealed doors of Rowan's chamber stood open. The sight made Evelyn stop. She had watched those doors close behind her less than an hour ago, certain she had made the worst mistake of her life. Now the room beyond glowed with moonlight, though the storm clouds still pressed against the windows. The Moonwell shimmered at the center of the chamber, its dark water no longer still. A figure stood beside it. Martha Bell. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, her gray hair pinned beneath a worn hood, her face pale with exhaustion. But her eyes were the same kind brown eyes that had once watched Evelyn crush herbs on a wooden table. Martha! Evelyn breathed. The older woman looked at her, and tears shone in her eyes. I am sorry it took me so long to find you, she said. Damien stepped forward at once. Remove her from this room. But before any guard could move, the water in the Moonwell rose in a silver arc. It did not strike anyone. It simply spread across the stone floor like a mirror. In its surface, an image appeared. A younger Rowan, barely more than a boy, stood beside Evelyn's mother beneath the same moonlit windows. Marian held a folded packet of papers against her heart. Her voice echoed through the chamber, clear enough for everyone to hear. Damien knows the curse is not an accident. He is feeding it through the council wards. No one moved. No one breathed. In the reflection, young Rowan reached for the papers, but Marian shook her head. Protect my daughter, she told him. When the Moonwell wakes, do not let them choose for her. The image faded. The silver water settled. And when Evelyn turned toward Lord Damien Crow, his calm smile was gone. For the first time that night, Lord Damien Crow looked afraid. It was not a dramatic change. He did not shout or run. His shoulders simply lost their perfect stillness, and his pale eyes moved from the quiet Moonwell to the faces around him, searching for one person who might still believe him. The council guards had seen the reflection. Martha Bell had heard Marian's voice. Rowan stood beside Evelyn without speaking, but the silence around him no longer felt like secrecy. It felt like restraint. Damien drew in a careful breath. A memory in enchanted water is not proof, he said. Old magic can be shaped. It can be manipulated by anyone desperate enough to claim power. Evelyn looked at the silver light resting across the floor. A few hours earlier, she would have lowered her eyes. She would have let someone with a polished voice decide which version of the truth was safest to accept. But her mother's letter was warm against her chest, and the crescent on her wrist no longer felt like a brand. It felt like a promise. Then let the Moonwell show us more, Evelyn said. Damien's gaze snapped toward her. Rowan turned his head slightly, looking at her with quiet concern. Evelyn, he said. You do not have to do this. She met his eyes. I know. The words mattered. She had needed to hear them. She needed Damien to hear them too. Then she stepped toward the edge of the dark water. The Moonwell answered before her hand could touch the surface. Silver light rose in slow ribbons around her wrist, curling through the air like mist beneath a full moon. The room filled with the scent of rosemary and rain. Evelyn closed her eyes, not because she was afraid, but because she remembered her mother's hands guiding hers over crushed herbs. She remembered being told that gentleness was not weakness. She remembered believing, for one small moment, that she was allowed to take up space in the world. When she opened her eyes, the water had become clear. Another memory appeared. Damien stood in the council chamber years ago, speaking to a circle of shadowed figures. His voice echoed from the surface. He spoke of keeping Rowan dependent on the curse. He spoke of controlling the throne through fear. He spoke of finding Marion Hart before she could carry the truth beyond the palace walls. No one moved until the image faded. Then one of the council guards stepped away from Damien and lowered his head. My lord, he said quietly, you will come with us. Damien's mouth tightened. You are making a mistake. No, Evelyn said. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the chamber. The mistake was believing no one would ever ask you to answer for what you did. The guards led Damien from the room without ceremony. The doors closed behind him, and the sound seemed to release a breath the palace had been holding for years. Martha came forward slowly, tears shining in her tired eyes. Your mother would be proud of you, she said. Evelyn wanted to believe her. She wanted to ask 100 questions. But first, she turned to Rowan. He looked different now. Not less powerful. Not less feared. But less distant, as though the truth had taken something heavy from his shoulders. The door is open, he said, glancing toward the hall. You can leave Blackthorn Palace tonight. No one will stop you. Evelyn looked at the open doorway. Beyond it waited the storm, the court, and a life she understood. Then she looked back at the Moonwell, at her mother's letter, and at the man who had finally given her the choice he should have given her long ago. I will not stay because I am trapped, she said. Rowan's eyes held hers. I would never ask you to. Evelyn took one slow step closer, stopping beside him. I will stay until I learn the truth, she said. And until this curse is finished. The Moonwell flared so brightly that every candle in the chamber lit at once. A low voice rose from the water, ancient and clear. The first bond has awakened. Now the true war begins.